I'm Jean J. Roy, and I did not grow up here. I grew up in western New York State, a small town, Alfred, New York, a treasurable town to grow up in. And what was it?
Schweinfurt was from there.
Who was?
Schweinfurt, the architect?
From Alfred, New York?
I think so.
Well, it's a wonderful town.
Move on.
And there was a third, this another thing you asked about.
Where you grew up, and when did you come to Cleveland? And just your whole story.
Well, I did grow up in Alfred, New York, and I came to Cleveland first in about 1947, then left, and returned in what is this? This is 2000. But in 1968 or 1970 is when it was. And I've lived here ever since.
And when you returned, what did you do? And what were you doing?
I taught, I was asked to teach at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and so I returned to Cleveland to do that job, which I did for 20 years. I taught anything in the music theory department: sight singing, ear training, harmony, form and style, counterpoint, and I loved it. It was just great fun.
So you were married to, Mr. Roy, so would you tell us about
Well,
that?
Klaus Roy and I met through music circles, and this was a second marriage for him and for me. We had so many similar interests and activities that it seemed like it was made in heaven. But we had a lovely time together. We led 7 trips to European music festivals, which was an added asset and a wonderful experience that we had. I finally decided that everybody who loves music is a wonderful person, because all the people who went on our trips were such wonderful people.
That's a lot of Clevelanders that went on your trips, I know that.
Yeah.
Got a lot out of them. So, out of that, your life, though, in University Circle is deep.
Yes, it is.
But what are some memorable stories about the Circle, maybe even apart from your career here?
The most memorable are and were the students at the Institute of Music. It was a real pleasure to deal with people who were so committed to something, trombone, clarinet, voice, whatever it was, that they were planning to make that interest in that talent a career. So it was a great privilege to work with them and help them grow up in a career and in their skills. But I also remember with a lot of amusement and pleasure the old building downtown where the Institute of Music was before it moved to University Circle, because it was an old mansion. And whenever I was in a room, I always wondered whose bedroom was this. All the former bedrooms were studios, and all the floors were creaky, and all the steps were creaky, so you created a rhythm yourself when you walked or went upstairs. But the move to University Circle was a very brilliant and necessary move to accommodate the number of students that would like to come to the Institute, and of course that grew when the facilities were more appropriate.
I took dog rows down there.
Did you? So you're familiar with the building.
And it became the American Automobile Association.
Is it still there?
Oh,
Yeah.
That mansion was renovated by the junior league. It is now owned by Cleveland State. It's a wonderful building,
Great.
and there are names to those rooms.
So CIM was in Mather Mansion for a time. I didn't realize that was
Mhm.
the location at one point.
Yeah. Then we moved to a real building.
Right, but they've made a wonderful building out of the music.
Really?
Yeah, the Cleveland Institute of Music, don't you love the new?
Oh, I love everything about it. I like the fact that we have reasonable studios, that there are places to put pianos in each of the theory faculty studios, that did not happen downtown. And the facilities are just that appropriate. In fact, I think they probably need more room by now.
At the Cleveland Institute of Music, more room? What about that wonderful, wonderful room for performance?
Oh, I think the halls are great. I'm thinking more about studios,
Oh,
because the studios, at least when I was still there, and I've been retired for about 8 years, somebody would use your studio in the afternoon to give lessons after you had left with classes that occurred in the morning. And that got a little bit difficult with chairs and with music stands and whatever was needed for other purposes. But it certainly was a great improvement over the building downtown.
I should say. Okay, anything else aside from music? What is your favorite spot at University Circle?
At University Circle, Severance Hall.
And aside from the musical part, is there any other aspect of Severance Hall?
Well, my husband worked there for 30 years. So his studio and record collection and all the other things that he found to put together is a treasure. And I think most of it has remained. He was a person who had to keep everything. So I'm sure they had to do some sorting after he died. But I find treasurable because he had great imagination in what would be important to the future. And it felt a certain responsibility on his part for keeping what he felt was something that would be advantageous in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us on the tape when he was there and so forth.
He died a year ago, this past, maybe 10, May of 10. And he came, he was there, what's 40 years from whatever it is, 2011. Yeah. His intention actually was not to be in the kind of position that he eventually filled in the Cleveland Orchestra. His plan was to teach piano or to teach music at a university. But this job really used all of his talents. It was a wonderful job for him.
Tell us about the name of the job and
He was communications director for the Cleveland Orchestra, and he wrote the program notes, did research as it was needed, and he was a marvelous writer. He came from Vienna when he was 15 years old, and to have accomplished so much in the English language was remarkable to me, because he wrote beautifully. And then he did translations for the Cleveland Orchestra, did interviews that were used on the radio, and was sort of handyman when it dealt with writing and with words.
he also had another role, which was to start the Cleveland Arts Prize.
Right. That was different from the Cleveland Orchestra.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it was his feeling that this being such an artistic town, that the artists should be recognized in some way and not just be working in their studios all by themselves. So Martha Joseph and he cooked up this plan. He couldn't have done it without Martha. And I think it's the Women's City Club sponsored it. Do they still? No? They sponsored the beginnings of the program, and I think it's been extremely helpful and good for Cleveland.
Anything else you want to tell us? Why did you move here?
Why did I move to Judson? That's a good question. I'm a people person, and I didn't like living all by myself in our house. The only association with people I had wonderful neighbors, and they were great to me, but I like to be with people. So that's the real reason. I was certainly not unhappy in my neighborhood or my life, but this is nicer because at least we have coffee in the morning. I get up with the birds, so it's nice to have somebody to talk to downstairs in the morning. And I know some people here. It was mostly for company.
You live nearby though,
Yes, in Cleveland Heights.
and so therefore University Circle was part of
Always.
what.
Yes, it certainly was.
Anything else?
What do you remember about the area just west of here, the 105th Street area? Did you spend much time there?
When I first came to Cleveland, just had my second marriage. My first marriage was to a medical student, and so that was. I don't think of it as years, but he was in medical school here, and 105th was the closest retail area one could go to. So there were lots of little restaurants and jazz clubs, and that was a lot of fun. It was something local. It was safe to go to, and it used local talent, which I always appreciate. So it was sort of the recreation area for students, medical students, whatever kind of students.
One question I have that I'm always curious about is, at what point did you first start to think that it was not safe anymore? Is there a moment that
Yes,
you
there
pointed to?
is. There is.
Can you describe
And it's probably foolish, but there was a woman, I sang in the Cleveland Orchestra Chorus, and there was a woman in the chorus who was walking from the bus station up to Severance Hall I think she was murdered. And that still feels scary to me. But I'm told there are, 5 police departments who work in University Circle. And that's kind of foolish, but
So you never
that's-
had any concerns about that area prior to
No.
1966?
was that when that happened? No,
1966.
I didn't. Well, I was a double bass player, so I played in several orchestras in the area, and I carried my bass everywhere, on the bus, on the streetcar, because we didn't own a car at the time, and I never felt any fear about it whatsoever. But after that incident, I was scared to do it. I would be a sitting or walking target with a big bass instrument, so I didn't dare do it anymore.
Did the Huff riots have any impact on how that event was perceived, do you think, or was it just because it was in University Circle itself and a place that everyone thought was a place of beauty and a place of safety?
Right. I don't remember any association with the Huff riots, but that doesn't mean there wasn't any. But it was a tragedy for University Circle with this incident.
On another note, in the 105th area, a more pleasant memory, I'm sure. I wonder if you could say something about the restaurants themselves. Any specific? I'm not sure about Nina, but I've always heard people talk about the restaurants, but then they never give any details. I'd love to hear some details. Some places that you remember.
I wish I could think of the name of one of them. They used to be up at Shaker Square also.
Clark's Restaurant.
What?
Clark's Restaurant.
No, I don't think so. I think it was another one.
Right.
Did Clark's have apple pie with ice cream on top?
Yes.
All right, then it was Clark's Restaurant. I remember that. Then I think there was some delicatessens,
Tasty Shop.
but I don't recall others. My husband was in medical school, and we were on a really strict budget. So we only spent money on things we had to have. It's good for everybody to go through that experience.
What about the theaters? Was there a favorite theater? of
There were
yours in
theaters
that
there.
area, or?
I don't recall that my husband and I went, but I think there were 3, weren't there?
At least.
I think 3.
I think there may be closer to 5.
Really?
I can't tell you more than
There were 3.
Yeah, I think it was 3.
Alhambra, I know, was 1. And Keith's 105th, and
Yeah.
what else?
It was nice to have it so close. And so intimate. These big theaters nowadays, where you have to walk up flights of stairs and so on.